All right, so requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking some other updates from the Middle East. Now, despite US President Donald Trump's optimism, the prospect of a normalization deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia appears to be fading. Saudi commentator Ali Shihabi, a close aide to Riyadh's leadership, has stated that an agreement is virtually impossible before year end. He has added that only a miraculous change in Jerusalem could alter the situation. Now, as per reports, Saudi officials remain cautious, signaling that long-standing political and religious disputes continue to block progress. Analysts are stating that any breakthrough would require significant diplomatic shifts, and for now, hopes of a swift agreement between the two nations remain slim. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Gedalia Bloom. Interesting statement coming in from Saudi Arabia. We did see the landmark Abraham Accords being inked just about 4 to 5 years back, which brought about 4 Arab nations to formally recognize Israel. There are, of course, hopes by Donald Trump to augment the Abraham Accords. There are talks taking place with the Saudis with regards to that. But regardless of this, there's been a lot of back-channel diplomacy taking place between Israel and Saudi Arabia as well. Why do you think the Saudi regime is hesitant to formally recognize Israel? Is it a question of their legitimacy, their image in both domestically and the Arab world at large?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons, but I think that the core reason, and let's go back to 4 or 5 years, as you mentioned, before the Abraham Accords, Iran was a very strong threat to the Gulf states. The Western world was ignoring it. The Europeans were going and signing one deal after the other that the Iranians were breaking their nuclear program, and so nobody was standing up except for Israel. And I think that's what drove, number one, the Abraham Accords was, number one, it was security. If the Gulf states created an alliance with Israel and Iran was acting aggressively, then they could rely on Israel, and they were right. The economics and everything else came after it, in which they put in front as the face of the Abraham Accords was just that. It was a front. It was definitely beneficial. But I'll say this. Since the 12-day war in which Israel significantly weakened the Iranian regime, the leverage of the Gulf states, and especially Saudi Arabia, who was the #1 enemy of Iran, it wasn't Israel, not America, first it's Saudi Arabia, they don't feel the leverage anymore vis-a-vis Iran, the Iranian threat to come to Israel. When they did, the Palestinian issue was not even a big issue. As you could go back into certain reports, Saudi officials would say, listen, we're ready to have agreements with Israel as long as they are discussing the idea of a Palestinian state. That was kind of like their most watered down messaging as far as creating a 2-state solution. Now that we see the Iranian regime is a lot weaker, now they're in a much stronger position. They don't need to have they don't need to join the Abraham Accords in order for the security. So I think that's where it comes from. And I'll tell you, when it comes to Israel's interest, our interest lies much more in securing our people and our land and not creating a Palestinian state than having an alliance with Saudi Arabia, in which we don't trust anyway. Let's not forget, 9/11, Osama bin Laden came from the Saudi family, was funded by a Saudi prince. And so how things turn, even though they're becoming more moderate, we don't know where 20 years is going to be. So we're not willing to bet a friendship on an unstable partner with the security and the safety of our own country.
I wanted to digress a little bit over here and speak about Israel's neighborhood at large. There's recently been a statement that's come in from Tom Barak, U.S.'s special envoy for Syria. This has come amidst Washington's frustration with Beirut with regards to the lack of headway being made for the disarmament of Hezbollah. He's branded Lebanon a failed state. To what extent would you concur?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't envy the Lebanese government. The Lebanese government the Lebanese people, the country, is one of the weakest in the Middle East. They are the first ones that really want to make peace with Israel, but they'll be the last because they can't lead, because they'll be under threat from their Arab brethren. So when it comes to the Lebanese, who the army doesn't have the firepower or the willpower to see the disarmament, the forced disarmament, because they're not doing it diplomatically. Hezbollah is not going to sign an agreement and hand over their weapons. They're between a rock and a hard place. They either sit back and let the status quo continue, or they walk into the prospect of a civil war. Now, the status quo for them is to watch Israel disarm Hezbollah. And we know that Israel is sending over intelligence to the Lebanese army and the Lebanese government to assist them in disarmament, even though they're not acting on it.
Yes.
I can only presume, and this, I have no evidence of this at all, but I can only presume that the Lebanese government and army has every interest to see Hezbollah disarm. They can't do it. They see Israel's actively doing it. And so I can only presume that the Lebanese government and army is giving intelligence to the Israeli officials in which they're showing where the targeted, where the Hezbollah strongholds are. And so we could target them in nighttime raids, as we've been doing in the last few months.
Indeed, I also wanted to touch upon Syria. There's a landmark meeting that's going to be taking place between Donald Trump and al-Shara very, very soon. The tentative date is set for the 10th of November at the White House. This is going to be the first ever visit by a Syrian head of state to Washington after decades of international isolation. There have, of course, been murmurs of the Trump administration applying a lot of pressure on Syria in order to reach a security framework with Israel. I wanted to understand from you, what are your expectations from this particular meeting?
You know, I think that the way that President Donald Trump's style is to put the cart in front of the horse, because he believes that through his leverage and power, if he says something, he puts it in the world, it'll be more likely to happen. As like we saw with with bringing Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accords, he was very optimistic, and I think that was more of a manifestation of it. When it comes to al-Jolani, the president of Syria, going to the United States, part of Tom Barak's goal is to have him as part of a committee to fight ISIS. Now, this reminds me back when my father used to work in computer securities, and he said to me, you know, big banks, big corporations, he said they never hired hackers, they never hired felony hackers, because even though they know the inside, they know how it works, they know how to get through. Putting them in a position will give them a different perspective because they know how the criminal thinks, but they can never be trusted. And so when it comes to al-Jolani, who started his career in Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda Iraq, which was very much in line and associated with ISIS, he's not to be trusted. And I think that for the Western world to bring him in, the only logical conclusion I could come with is that they're not being naive, or maybe they are. They're not being naive, but they're trying to leverage the Western world and everything that comes with it, all the benefits that come with it, for al-Jolani to bring Syria into the West and away from jihad. So time will tell. We'll see what happens. But again, I don't trust him like my father would never hire a hacker to do cybersecurity for a major bank. I would never hire al-Jolani to be the overseer of the fight against ISIS.
Indeed, and a lot of people have pointed out that the State Department tweet a couple of years back, declaring him a wanted terrorist, that's still up. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time and, of course, sharing your perspective on what's taking place in the Middle East. Meanwhile, viewers, we're shifting focus to more news coming in.